There we go. That is always fun. We're gonna be doing this all day today. I am gonna love it. Hey, when you got high water and it's stained, there's almost nothing better out there when you've got high skies and a sunny day than pitching and flipping into wood. We're gonna go over some options today to show you how to get the most out of your jigs or your plastic. Don't miss this episode. This is Jim Crowley Outdoors.
We're now south of 55. We're gonna take a little scenic drive down Interstate 49.
Hey, one tip that I can give you is that when you're fishing real shallow water, and even though the water's a little bit stained today, I don't want to give the fish any extra ideas that were there. So I know we're going to be fishing in about 2 or 3 foot of water. So as effective as my hummingbird graph is for this area, I'm just going to turn the graph off. I don't need any extra noise. I know what I'm doing. I know I'm going to be fishing 2 to 3 foot deep. And I'm also going to put my trolling motor on a lower setting. I want as little noise, as little interference as I can. I don't want to give the fish any extra clues that we're there. And that way we can be a lot more effective with our presentations. There you go. Man, I watched, when they eat a jig like that, that is so much fun. Check this out. This is this new little jig that I helped design for Lure Parts Online. It's called the Flip and Skip with a flat head. And let me put this fish back real quick. It was cool. I skipped the bait up there. As soon as it hit the water, I saw the swirl come off the V in the lay down, and he ate it. Just a great little. That's just the best feeling in the world for me when you're pitching a jig or plastic and you see that swirl and they come out and get it. Fun. Fun. I felt that hit. That's what we're talking about now. That's getting a little better. Look how he ate that. Look how he ate that. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit. Let's see if I can get the. So I can show you here. He is upset. Let's get this jig out of here. Put that. It's a nice fish right there. Okay. So what we did on this jig, and when we go over the equipment and stuff like that, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But this is a really interesting. I really like the way that this jig was designed. We did with a flat head. We got a big 4.0 VMC flipping hook on here, and it just when I trim my jigs for skipping, I cut the skirt down. I put a short trailer on there, and so that's exactly what that looks like there. But when we go over the equipment section, we'll really get into it and show you exactly how I set the jig up. Now they're biting. I could go catch another one. One of the nice things about being in heavy cover like this, that you have options. You can either pitch the bait to it, or with overhanging trees like that, you can skip to it. And how I skip is, the reel doesn't matter. Whatever brand reel you use, it's fine. What I do is I dial it down and I don't fill the spool all the way to the top. You don't need a special reel to do this. You need to get out in the water and practice where your setting is perfect for you. I have it where it is for me. The rod I'm using is a 7.3. This is an MB 7.3 12 to 25. It's an American Tackle Bushido blank. Why am I telling you that? Because it's got a fast enough tip to where I can load that jig up to where I can skip it. Because what's doing the skipping is the motion that you do in the tip of that rod. Let me show you. What I'm going to do is I want to make a load trajectory toward the water, just like I'm skipping a stone, okay? And I'm going to roll my wrist over. And I skipped it right back underneath there. The more you learn to skip, the better your chances are going to be to get at fish that nobody really wants to take the time to, because skipping is a little bit tough to learn, but I have so many more options to work the cover once I can pitch it, once I can flip it, and once I can skip it. Now, when I set up the jig, just like kind of we were talking about before, we got that flat head on the flip and skip. This is 3/8 and 1/2 ounce. We make it in those 2 sizes. There's a lot of muck in the bottom here. So although in the summertime, a lot of times I will throw a 1/2 ounce jig because I want a reaction strike, I'm not doing it here. And the reason I'm not doing it here is because that muck on the bottom, the bait drops too fast and the fish are suspended up alongside the branches. A 3/8 falls slower and it doesn't get stuck in the bottom as much. I trim my skirt to about about 1/8 of an inch below the hook. I trim my trailer back a little bit, and so I have a nice compact package. It's easier to skip that way. If I just do it out here, you can see how far I can skip that bait. And when you dial it down, as you will see, there's no backlash. Yes, you're still using your thumb. You're not going to use a bait caster correctly unless you learn to use your thumb. So when I dial it down, use my thumb, and make that motion like skipping a stone, that flat head hits the surface and skips my bait another 15 or 20 foot back, sometimes farther, if I'm thrown under a dock or under a bush. Learn to skip. Yes, it takes time. Yes, you'll have a lot of backlashes. And once you learn it, fishing a plastic or fishing a jig like this, you'll become even more deadly at putting numbers of fish in the boat. This segment of Jim Crowley Outdoors is brought to you by these and other fine sponsors. You know, I think one of the biggest problems people have with fishing a jig, there's two baits that I basically notice people are intimidated by, and that's jerk baits and fishing a jig. And if you think about the jig, it's a vertical presentation. You want it to drop down inside the cover that you're fishing. So with that being said, whenever I pitch a bait out there, I'm always going to strip line off, usually to the first guide, because I want that bait dropping straight down. I want it dropping into that cover. If you don't do that and just pick up on the rod, then the bait will just pendulum away from the cover and you've defeated the purpose. And so if you're not used to fishing a jig a real lot, how I usually do is I keep the rod at about the 2 o'clock position, and I kind of drag and shake or hop it till about 1, and then reel back down and start over again. 95% of your hits come on the fall. So the idea behind it is the more falls that I can make with the bait, the more chances I have of a fish hitting. So just remember something, whenever you're fishing this bait, it's not a real fast technique. If you want to fish a jig faster, that's when a swim jig comes in, and there's some other swimming techniques that you can do with it. But just for working a jig through heavy cover like this, that 2 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and just remember you want that bait to fall on slack line. Watch your line and pay attention to what that line's doing. Sometimes you won't feel the bite. The line will just start moving one way or the other. Fishing a jig is not hard. What it takes is practice. I build all my own rods. So since today we're talking about jig fishing, I'm going to show you the starting process of building a jig rod. Today we're going to cover the handle assembly with the reel seat, the grips, and everything that consists of that handle. And that's where I start on the rod. But the first thing you have to consider is the blank. The blank I'm using today is an American Tackle Bushido blank. It's an MB 7312-25, which means it's 7 foot 3 inches long. It handles from ½ ounce all the way up to 1.25 ounce lures. However, this rod has a really fast tip, and I've fished with it easily with lures being 3/16 or 1/4 ounce as well. Okay, so the first step that I do is I want to mark off where I'm going to put the guides on this blank. And I'm using a microwave air guides, and inside this package there is basically a chart in here that tells you where to mark the guides. So what I did is I actually made it larger so I could see it a lot easier, and I have a guide placement chart. And then I lay my measuring tape on, and I start the tip, and then I go back. So the first guide away from the tip is going to be 2 7/8. So I mark that, and then I go all the way down the rod so I know exactly where the guides are going to be. And how I mark it is just use a permanent crayon. Basically, you can get that from Lure Parts Online, or Angler's Workshop. We'll put up both websites there so you can get this stuff. But I use this for all the rods, and one of these markers will last you a really, really, really long time. So after that is set up, then the next thing I do after that is I'm going to look at the cork that I'm going to use. And on this, you can use anything you want material-wise. There's a bunch of choices that you can use for a reel seat and for the assembly. So here I'm using the HCC reel seat, which is basically handcrafted carbon, okay, and this is from American Tackle, very, very light. And this has something on it called a ULH hood. Well, I want a covering for that. And so the cork that I have for that, again, you can get all these things at Angler's Workshop. So I've already drilled out the cork right here, which is going to fit right over that. And then here is the grip that is going to go right behind the reel seat. So when it's on the rod, it's going to look just like that. Now to drill out the cork, what I'm going to need is I'm going to need some reamers, and they have them in different packages, okay? So you always start out small, and then you get basically to the size of the rod blank where the reel seat's going to sit on there. And yes, it takes some practice, and yes, there are videos online that you can go and watch that. I taught myself. If I can do it, trust me, so can you. Once you get it down, it's going to be real easy to fit the cork or any other material like that to make the reel seat that you want. Okay, well, the carbon composite or the compressed carbon reel seats that American Tackle has come out with are the next generation in sensitivity. And so what's the big deal about compressed carbon or handcrafted carbon? Okay, so these carbon reel seats amplify the sound of your graphite. So once these are on there, as sensitive as the graphite that you're using, just think about this being like a megaphone. And when you feel a bump or you feel a tap, it gets amplified more so than any other reel seat out there, because carbon is that kind of material that a little thump will basically feel like a boom. It is the most sensitive thing. You talk about counting rocks when you're fishing a jig down riprap, for example. You know, the best way to show this to you is I just got done filming a little video a couple weeks ago, and I want to show this to you because you can see me moving the rods around on the deck, hold my jig rod up in the air, and all of a sudden I just feel this solid thump, and it was with a rod that has this compressed carbon reel seat on it, and I just instantly set the hook. Check this out. All right, so I'm going to put the butt cap on the rod, and I mix up this pro paste, and part of it is hardener and part of it is resin. So I thoroughly mix that all up together, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of it, and I try to make enough of that so I can do the whole reel seat assembly and everything. If you don't, you can mix up some other. It doesn't dry right away. So now I'm going to cover this right here. Don't ever worry about putting too much on, because you can always take some paper towel and wipe it off, and we'll show you how to do that here in a second. But so there, we got enough glue on there. Now when I put that on there, I just don't stick it on. What I want to do is I want to turn this so the glue gets spread out evenly inside the butt cap. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put on the grip behind the reel seat. I've already marked off here where I want that to be. That way I know where my hand sits on here. The rod butt doesn't go past my elbow. Now, when you go to buy a rod, they're all set the same way. The cool thing about making your own rod is that you can set this wherever you want. You can make it longer, you can make it shorter, whatever feels the most balanced to you. So I have it where I want it right now, and that's where my reel seat is going to sit right here, and I know my grip's going to be right here. That's perfect for the jig rod that I want to build. So move this back up here. Now I'm going to take a little more of that glue adhesive right there, rub it around on the rod, and I'm going to put it in front of that mark, and I'll show you why in a second why I'm doing that. Okay, that should be plenty. Now, just like we did before, to set this, I'm going to take this and just move it and rotate it, okay? Just like so. There we go. Now it's going to be thoroughly through there, and I don't mind if I'm getting a little glue on this part up here, because it's going to be set where I want it. Right there, that's where I want it. Perfect, right there. Now, I'm going to wipe off this excess glue back here. Again, that's going to seal that cork. Back there. We'll get this off right here. Now, this is where it comes into play. You can spray some of that alcohol on there. Clean it off nice and neat. Yeah, that's what you want. That stuff is worth its weight in gold, folks, I'm telling you. So that's it right there. That's where I want it. Now, I'm going to build arbors on here, because what arbors are is, if you notice, the reel seat is actually wider in diameter than the blank. So how do you get it to match up? you take this masking tape and you build arbors on here. That's what we're going to do next, right after this. This segment of Jim Crowley Outdoors is brought to you by these and other fine sponsors. All right, okay, that should be good. Now what I did right there is I built those arbors with that tape, and I made the back one a little bit thicker because the back end of the reel seat is a little bit wider. I made the one in front a little bit thinner so that it fits the diameter here. Remember, you don't want it going on real tight because you won't leave a lot of room for the adhesive. So now, since I have that exactly how I want it, now I'm just going to put, just like I did before, is I'm going to put the adhesive. Like I said, don't worry about putting on too much in this, all right? I like making my reel seats just rock solid, and so a little extra is better than not enough. So I'm gonna make sure that this is coated really well, all right? And this adhesive goes a long way, but like I said, I like putting a little bit extra on there. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so that's on there, a little more here. Okay, just like so. All right, we have that there. Now, I'm gonna move this back a little bit, just so I got more room to turn this. Just like so. That's getting that glue really rounded up on there. Now I'm gonna move it up just a little bit more where I had it. Make it right here so it matches my back end. Push them together. And there you go. That's what it takes. That's it. Of building your reel seat on a jig rod, or just about any rod. You can make it as complicated, you can make it as easy and functionable as you want. The cool thing is, it's up to you. Fishing jigs around heavy cover like we were today, I want an abrasion resistant line. And for years I've used Sufix. Now this is the Invisalign, and I'll use this in 17 or 20 pound test. I like that thicker line when I'm skipping baits. Sufix also makes a great line called Advance, and from time to time I'll use that in 17 or 20 pound test too. It's a fantastic line. Now, the reason I use fluorocarbon is because one, fluorocarbon reflects light, which means light bounces off of it. Now when it's standard muddy water, I really don't have to worry about that too much. But the other characteristic that fluorocarbon has is fluorocarbon line sinks, okay? So when it sinks, I have better lure and line control over my baits. And so that's why I like it. And on top of that, it has very little stretch, so I can really feel those bites extremely well. Now the jig I was using today was a jig I helped design for Lure Parts Online, and this is called the Flip and Skip. It was a 3/8 ounce head, and we're gonna show you the part numbers. So if you wanna order this or order ones like it, you can easily do so just because you're watching this show. All right, so this is the 3/8 ounce jig, Flip and Skip, and so one of the first things I do with it, I always tweak stuff, okay? So on this show, not only are we going to show you how to make rods and some of the lures that we use, we're also going to show you how to tweak some of them. So that's what we're going to do right here. One, I'm going to pull that weed guard out a little bit, push it forward. That's going to give it more deflection qualities around that hook. Now this is an awesome hook on here. It's a 4.0 VMC, but what I'm going to do, and I do this with all my jigs, is I'm going to take the pliers and just change that angle from here to here. Why am I doing that? Because when I set the hook, now the jig is going to catch farther back in the fish's face. A lot of those hook sets you saw today, that jig was buried. That's one of the main reasons. A good head design and just tweaking that hook just a little bit. Now the skirt I was using was a hole-in-one skirt. It's called a Tarantula hole-in-one skirt, and this is from Lure Parts Online as well. Now, what I'm going to do here is just wet that up a little bit, and I'm going to slide that jig skirt on there. The cool thing about this Tarantula skirt is once it's on there, that's it. It's not coming off. And this is a great skirt to use when you're skipping baits because it's not going to be pulling down. You're not going to have to adjust it. Once it's on, it is on. Goes right in front of the little wire keeper that we have on here, locks right on the head, and that is your jig. Now I'm going to show you another little trick that I do, a little tweak that I do, especially when I know I'm going to be skipping a lot. I'm going to press that skirt down just like that. I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut that skirt about 1/8 of an inch below the hook. Okay, that's less drag on the water. Also, when that bait stands up, all the skirt material is now going to stick out, almost like the tentacles on a crawdad. It's going to have a lot more lifelike appeal, and as I said, less drag on the water when you're skipping. That is everything we use today. Hey, let's go catch one more fish. Oh, good one there. Get in here, buddy. Yeah. Now that right there is the way to end the day. Hey, I hope we showed you some more things about how great it can be to skip, pitch, and flip jigs. And that skip and jig from Lure Parts Online is just an absolutely phenomenal jig. Let me put this fish back. Hey, you want to find out more? Just go to lurepartsonline.com and we'll show you some codes at the end of the show where you can get a discount on some things, as well as from some of our other sponsors. Hey, thanks so much for joining us this week. We're going to be on the road somewhere, someplace, hopefully with another great adventure. God bless you. I'm Jim Crowley. We'll see you soon.